Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 12 of season 2 of The Flash called Fastlane. And this was an okay episode. It definitely had some moments, but I don't really think it was one of the strongest of the season so far. So let's just kind of get right down into things. Um, the whole stuff with this character Tarpit. Now this is somebody I vaguely remember reading one story with him in the comics, but beyond that, I really don't know a lot about the character. I did like how they start off mostly just us seeing him as a guy, and then by the end of the episode, he's sort of this blob monster dude, which is how Tar Pit looks in the comics. Which I mean that's cool. I'm awful curious as to just how they're gonna kind of keep control of him over in Iron Heights, but I guess that's about the closest thing any place outside the pipeline has to a metahuman cell. I mean, is that what they're going to do with him, or are they going to throw him in the pipeline? I really wish they'd made that a little bit more clear. But yeah, and I also love how apparently that criminal guy that Tarpit was going to kill. How in the world did Tarpit know that guy was going to be just coming out? Like, was the guy like? How did he know he was going to be coming out of the police station at that particular moment? I mean, was Tar Pit surveilling the police station, waiting for somebody to bring this guy out? I mean, it's one of those things I probably shouldn't think about, but it's like, how in the world did he know that guy was going to be there at that particular moment? So yeah, Tar Pit just kind of there to be somebody for the Flash to fight, and to ultimately cause Iris to get injured. So yeah, not really a big surprise that he's not very well developed as a character. Honestly, for a second, I actually thought that they were going to kill him when they threw those grenades into him. But then he sort of got up and Joe punched him. So it's like, oh, okay. So I guess we're going to keep the Team Flash kills the villain body count to 2 or 3 or however it was. I'm pretty sure it was 2. So, so let's see. Also, for me, not very engaging was the whole subplot with Wally. Now, there were bits of it that I liked. Well, let's start with the thing that really bugged me the most. And that's the whole part where Iris acts like a real moron and goes and confronts this criminal dude all by herself. And now she did sort of rig things up, so he's like, oh, if you do anything about me, the folks at the newspaper are going to know. Like, well, okay, Iris, that was smart, but everything else you did in that situation was monstrously stupid. And that guy was right to point out, it's like, you do realize that I'm an extraordinarily dangerous individual, and I would have no problem whatsoever hurting you, right? And correct me if am I remembering this correctly? Wasn't it kind of established that Iris had been taught to at least defend herself by Joe? In fact, if I remember correctly, it was even mentioned in the early part of season 1 that she'd originally wanted to be a police officer like her dad, but Joe had so heavily discouraged her in that one that she basically just kind of said "F it" and went off and to kind of do her own thing. Um, so I was kind of like watching that whole thing where the guy's basically kind of menacing her. I'm like, Iris, I'm pretty sure you have at least a reasonably competent degree of self-defense training. I don't know if it's going to be enough to take this guy down, but you seem to be a little bit more intimidated in this situation than perhaps you should be. But of course, this also sort of does bring up the question, is Iris being exceptionally reckless because she knows that the Flash will come and save her bacon like he does this episode? Or for the most part? Something to kind of think about. Um, Now, with the whole plot with Wally, uh, this kind of now that Francine's gone, this sort of really gives it a chance to sort of see how he deals with just Iris and Joe. And again, Jesse L. Martin really continues to be one of the really shining stars of this episode. And both he and the way Iris interacted with him were like, hey, family's not always the easiest thing in the world to do, but we're there. We support each other. That's what family does. And I really do like the situation that Joe finds himself in, where he's kind of more or less looking the other way on Wally's street racing thing because he doesn't want to drive Wally away. And he gets rightfully called out on that. I mean, he is practicing a double standard. He is guilty of basically kind of being a bit of a hypocrite here. But he does make a very valid case as to why he's doing it. It's like, look, I don't want to drive Wally off by playing cop when I need to form a real relationship with him, get him to see me as a person. But at the end of the day, I really like the way he puts it is that to Wally, it's like, look, I'm your dad, I can't be your friend. And that, in my book, is exactly how it should be when it comes to parenting. Or at least when the person you're dealing with is not really a complete adult yet. You know, a lot of parents today are terrified of the idea that their kid might be angry with them or ever have negative feelings toward them. But I mean, that's kind of in a lot of ways how it has to be if you're a teacher as well. You can be friendly with students, but you cannot be their friend. Sometimes you have to be the person, just like when you're a parent, that goes out there and has to lay down the law. And it sucks to do that sometimes. But students and children are all given rules for a reason. And, sometimes that being harsh and making sure those rules are enforced, yeah, that's going to cause some resentment. But at the end of the day, it's definitely a lot better than just letting people go and do whatever they want because, well, we know what happens to kids who grow up like that. They turn into spoiled, obnoxious little jerks, you know. And if they're wealthy, spoiled, obnoxious little jerks, they get away with killing people by claiming affluenza. So, yeah. And it is a point in Wally's favor that he gets where Joe is coming from at the end. So some progress is made forward. The West family situation moves forward. Although again, we don't really haven't seen very much about between Wally and Barry, and some of Wally's comments do seem to indicate that he continues to bear a little bit of resentment towards Barry. And I do like how Barry did acknowledge that yeah, Joe was also hard on him too at times. But again, Wally's a more mature person. I'm sorry, Barry's a more mature person than Wally is. He gets why Joe did what he did back in the day. And again, as we've seen time and time again, Joe has his flaws, but at the end of the day, the guy's a great dad. Um, Nothing really huge to say about the whole Iris getting hurt situation. I was just sort of a little like, okay, this show is making way too big a deal about this because I can see that Iris took that piece of glass right about here. Now, I'm not huge on anatomy, but I'm pretty sure that's not exactly near any major arteries. So she's probably going to have a really nasty scar, and it's going to hurt to move her left arm for a while. But otherwise, she's going to be fine. Now, granted, if the glass had been a little bit further in another direction, she might have caught it in the neck or the heart or the eye or something like that. Iris was totally just within a few inches of death. That is fair. But the actual injury seems, I think, to have been a little, well, the seriousness of the reaction, not the injury itself. Yeah, you get a big piece of glass jammed into this part of your body going at God only knows how many miles an hour. Yeah, that's going to do some damage. But it's just like, okay, it was a close call, but the actual damage was really not life-threatening. Is I guess what I'm saying. One thing though, I did like in that scene where before Iris gets hurt, when Tar Pit makes the car sort of the car Wally was driving was red and with yellow stripes. And when the character of Kid Flash originally debuted, he wore a costume that was basically the same as the Flash's costume, red with the sort of yellow bits here and there. And then shortly thereafter, he moved on to his own costume, which was mostly yellow with a few bits of red there. And today, the Kid Flash costume is silver with bits of red. And that's something I'm super wild about, but, nothing's perfect. So, yeah, they are. It's a nice little nod to the mythos of Kid Flash there. So let's see, what else? Yeah, we definitely have to talk about what's going on with Harry this episode. Him, um, going through with his plan with Zoom to steal some of Barry's speed, and Zoom making it quite clear. It's like, dude, seriously, don't try and dick with me. And what I really like is that ultimately Harry chooses of his own free will to do the right thing. I like how Barry points out, like, our choices are not always binary. It's not either yes or no, either or. And Harry does make the case that, yeah, actually, that is how life works. So it's an interesting philosophical crossroads, and it always reminds me of this thing I read from involving from the French philosopher Sartre. And while a lot of what that guy wrote was way over my head, there was one bit that he did, and I'm going to really simplify it, that really, really stuck with me ever, and I've kept it in my mind, and ever since. And basically, Sartre says a lot of people, and again, I'm seriously paraphrasing and simplifying here. He basically says people are always saying, I have no choice about this. And he says, well, that's just not true. We always have a choice. Like if you hate your job, well, you have the choice of not going to that job. You have the choice of not quitting that job. Now, granted, that might bring financial ruin upon you, but the choice exists. And what Sartre is talking about here basically boils down to this. And this struck me as something incredibly wise, which is why I took the time to really burn it into my brain. He basically said, we always have a choice. We're just not always going to have a choice that we like. And that really struck home with me as being something very true. And because of that, whenever I hear people say things like, oh, I didn't have a choice, I just can't help but think, well, yeah, actually you did. It's just your alternatives might have been pretty shit. So, yeah. Flash and French philosophy. Huh? Where else on YouTube you gonna get that, baby? Only right here. Yeah. Never take yourself too seriously, folks. If you want a little bit more philosophy from me, that's it. Okie dokie. So, let's see. Oh, yeah. So now we can seal off Earth 2 if we need to. And Harry's confessed and gets thrown in the pipeline, which is awesome. But now it's like, okay, we're gonna go to Earth 2 and we're gonna take the fight to Zoom, and this is gonna be great. I love stories where superheroes go to alternate realities, especially alternate Earths. It's one of those things that, to me, it never gets old. It's just always interesting to see the possibilities. And we're going to be seeing some more of that. It's actually even been announced that just today word got out that Grant Gustin as the Flash is going to be guest starring in Supergirl on an episode next month, which I am ridiculously pumped for. It's one of those things. It's like, okay, maybe that'll happen in a couple of years down the road. I never thought for a moment that this is something that they would pull off here in the show's first season. But how cool is that? We've seen the reference to Men of Steel over on Legends of Tomorrow, but here the Earth of Supergirl is now officially going to be added to the the CW multiverse. How sweet is that? How sweet is that? So I guess no matter what happens with the new 52, and there only being 52 alternate Earths or whatever the hell's happening there, I can't keep track of what's going on with DC. I guess at the end of the day, Hyper Time and Infinite Earths has ultimately won out, which all the better if you ask me. Anyway, I'm going to call it here, guys. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and please join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.